Have you ever noticed how, as people grow older, they sometimes develop habits that quietly distance them from the people they love, not on purpose, but in subtle, everyday ways that no one warns them about? It's not just about aging skin or moving slower. Some behaviors, if left unchecked, can quietly erode relationships and make the later years feel lonelier than they need to be. The hardest part, most older adults don't even realize they're doing it. From the way we speak to the way we handle change, certain patterns can slowly create walls between us and the world around us. But here's the hopeful truth. Once we're aware of them, we can begin to shift, and that can make all the difference. Take Margaret, for example. She's 71 now, a retired librarian who once lit up every room she walked into. Her friends called her the soul of the neighborhood, always sharing book suggestions, always ready for a chat over coffee. But something began to change. The phone stopped ringing as often. Neighbors visited less. Holiday invitations seemed to fade away. At first, Margaret thought maybe others were just too busy. But then she started to wonder, had something changed in her? Without meaning to, she had begun complaining more about her back pain, about how the world isn't like it used to be. She stopped fixing her hair, stopped wearing the bright blouses she used to love. Conversations turned into monologues. She avoided learning new things and often brushed off help from others. Slowly, quietly, she had built a distance she didn't intend. Margaret's story isn't rare. In fact, it's more common than we think. The good news is, it's never too late to make a change. Recognizing these habits is the first step toward stronger connections, more meaningful conversations, and a richer life, even as we grow older. And trust me, number 7 is the one that catches most people off guard, but by the time they realize it, it may already be affecting their lives in deep ways. Before we get started, if you find this topic helpful, I consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us share more life-changing stories like this one. Number 1, becoming too negative or critical. Margaret never thought of herself as a negative person. She believed she was simply being truthful, but as the years passed, she began noticing how often her words leaned toward frustration. A sore knee in the morning led to a complaint. Watching the news triggered deep sighs. Conversations with her children often ended in remarks like, "Things were better in my time," or "People had more manners back then." At first, she didn't see a problem, but slowly, things began to shift. Her friends kept calls short, avoiding long chats. Her grandchildren, once eager to visit, now seemed distant, often making polite excuses to skip their usual weekend drop-ins. What Margaret didn't realize was that even subtle negativity can quietly drain those around us. Most people don't enjoy leaving a conversation feeling worse than when it started. It's completely natural to feel overwhelmed at times. Life changes quickly, our bodies slow down, and the world doesn't always feel familiar anymore. But when complaints become the main thread of our words, they begin to build emotional distance. So how can we shift this pattern? Start by choosing to lead with something uplifting. Instead of beginning a chat with aches or worries, try saying something like, "I had a good night's sleep," or "The garden looks beautiful today." Simple observations of gratitude set a lighter tone. Limit venting to a short window, 2 minutes is plenty. Then gently steer the conversation towards something hopeful or interesting. Practice curiosity over criticism. If your grandson is excited about a new video game, instead of brushing it off, try asking, "What do you like about it?" When we show interest, we build bridges. When we dismiss, we build walls. Margaret didn't notice how her tone affected others until she began making small changes. When she started conversations with warmth and curiosity, people stayed longer, smiled more, and opened up in ways she hadn't felt in years. So ask yourself, when you speak with others, are your words drawing them closer or quietly pushing them away? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever noticed how a small shift in your tone changed a relationship? Number 2, ignoring personal hygiene and appearance. There was a time when Margaret took great joy in getting ready for the day. Her closet was filled with cheerful blouses. Her favorite perfume was always within reach, and her hair was never out of place. Even a quick trip to the store was a chance to express her bright spirit. But over the years, that enthusiasm began to fade. First, it was little things. She stopped coloring her hair, skipped nail appointments, and started wearing oversized clothes for comfort. Then came the thought, who am I trying to impress? Anyway, soon, days blurred together in the same set of house clothes. She rarely glanced in the mirror, convincing herself it didn't matter. But deep inside, something felt off. It wasn't just about how she looked, it was about how she felt. Strangers no longer offered warm smiles. Friends stopped dropping by as often. And when she saw old photos, she barely recognized the vibrant woman she once was. What Margaret hadn't realized is this: the way we care for ourselves on the outside often reflects how we feel on the inside. And others pick up on that energy too. Taking pride in your appearance isn't vanity, it's a form of self-love. It tells your mind, you still matter, and it shows the world you're still engaged in life. So how can you bring that feeling back? Start by choosing clothes that make you feel good, not fancy. Just clean, well-fitting, and uplifting. Even if you're staying home, change into something fresh each day. Add a touch of color, something bright, soft, or playful that lifts your mood. Stick to your basic hygiene habits: a warm shower, trimmed nails, a brushed head of hair, or even some lotion for your hands. These simple acts gently remind you that you're worth caring for. Bring back little details that spark joy: a favorite scarf, a lovely pair of earrings, a familiar fragrance. These things aren't about impressing others. They're about reconnecting with the most confident version of yourself. Once Margaret made small changes: a clean blouse, a brushed hairstyle, a spritz of perfume, something beautiful happened. People noticed, she noticed, and little by little, she felt like herself again. What's one small act of self-care that makes you feel good every day? Share your ideas in the comments. Number 3, becoming stubborn and resistant to change. Margaret had always found comfort in her routines. She liked knowing what to expect, doing things her way, and sticking with what had worked for decades. So when her children and grandchildren started messaging instead of calling, she brushed it off. I don't need all that, she'd say with a wave of her hand. If they want to talk to me, they know where to find me. But over time, something changed. The phone rang less, family still shared updates, but in group chats she wasn't part of. She missed birthday greetings, funny videos, and everyday moments that used to bring them closer. It wasn't just about technology, it was about staying connected, and she was slipping further away without realizing it. Being set in your ways can feel safe, especially after a lifetime of doing things a certain way. But when we refuse to adjust, we may quietly disconnect ourselves from the people we love most. Whether it's learning something new, trying a different method, or opening up to unfamiliar habits, change isn't always easy, but it's often necessary. So, how can you stay open to change without feeling overwhelmed? Start with curiosity. Instead of saying, "That's not for me," try asking, "Can you show me how that works?" A simple willingness to try keeps your mind active and your heart open. Let your grandkids or loved ones guide you. Turn it into shared time, a bonding moment rather than a task. You don't have to embrace everything at once. Small steps count, like sending a quick message, trying a new app, or even watching a show your grandchildren enjoy. Margaret eventually let her granddaughter show her how to send a message. What surprised her wasn't just how easy it was, but how many beautiful moments she had been missing. Inside jokes, daily pictures, Simple check-ins that reminded her she mattered. By letting go of resistance, she didn't just learn a skill, she rebuilt connection. What's something new you've learned recently that helped you feel closer to others? Share your story in the comments, we'd love to hear it. Number 4, hoarding and refusing to let go of clutter. Margaret had always held on to things that reminded her of special moments, birthday cards from years gone by, old newspapers she meant to read, clothes she hadn't worn in ages but kept just in case. Every item felt meaningful, tied to a memory or a time she didn't want to lose. But over the years, her cozy home began to feel crowded. Cabinets were packed, hallways narrowed, and surfaces overflowed. Still, she didn't see a problem. Everything here matters. She'd say, I might need it someday. It wasn't until her daughter gently suggested clearing a few things out that Margaret realized how much the clutter was taking over, not just physically, but emotionally too. The truth is, holding on to too much can weigh us down. It can anchor us in the past, leaving little room to enjoy the present. A cluttered space can create stress, limit movement, and make us less willing to welcome others in. So, how do you begin letting go without feeling overwhelmed? Start with one small area, a drawer, a shelf, or a single box. Ask yourself, do I use this? Does it bring me joy? If not, it might be time to pass it on. Consider donating items to someone who could truly use them. Recycle what you can. Offer sentimental pieces to loved ones who will treasure them. Make decluttering a gentle habit. Even letting go of one item a day can make a difference over time. Also, think about safety. Less clutter means fewer tripping hazards, easier cleaning, and a more peaceful environment to relax in. When Margaret finally began to clear space, she felt lighter emotionally and physically. Her home became easier to move through, and for the first time in years, she felt comfortable inviting friends over again. Letting go doesn't mean losing the past. It means making space for the life you want to live today. What's one thing you've let go of that made you feel freer? Share your story in the comments. Number 5, becoming easily frustrated with others. Margaret never thought of herself as short-tempered. She had always been the calm, understanding one in her family. But lately, small things seemed to irritate her faster than they used to. One morning at the post office, she found herself behind a young employee who was moving slowly, struggling to scan each package. Margaret's foot tapped impatiently. She sighed loudly and muttered, "This shouldn't take that long." The clerk looked up with startled eyes. His hands were trembling. He was clearly new, perhaps anxious. In that quiet moment, Margaret felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She hadn't been kind. She had been impatient, and it wasn't who she wanted to be. As we age, it can become easier to lose patience, especially when things feel slower or less efficient. But reacting with frustration not only hurts those around us, it also steals our own peace of mind. Instead of snapping, try this. Take one deep breath. Count to 5 before you speak. Ask yourself, will this really matter an hour from now? Practice empathy. That slow driver might be someone's father. That distracted store clerk could be working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Even a simple "take your time" can change someone's entire day. Margaret began making small changes. The next time she saw that same clerk, she smiled and said, "You're getting better every day." His face lit up, and so did her heart. Patience is a quiet strength. It doesn't shout, but it builds bridges. Have you ever caught yourself getting annoyed too quickly? How do you bring yourself back to calm in those moments? Share your thoughts below. Number 6, speaking more, listening less. Margaret had always been the heart of every conversation, full of wisdom, memories, and advice. She loved to share, but over the past few months, she noticed something unsettling. Her daughter wasn't calling as often, and when she did, their chats felt shorter, almost like she was in a hurry to hang up. One afternoon, Margaret asked gently. Is everything okay? I've missed our talks. There was a long pause before her daughter replied, Mom, I love talking to you. I do. But sometimes, I feel like I'm not really part of the conversation. I listen, but I don't always feel heard. Those words struck Margaret deeply. She had never meant to take over their conversations, but as she reflected, she realized how often she rushed to give advice, interrupted mid-sentence, or turned the focus back to her own stories. It's something many of us do as we grow older. We want to connect, to guide, to stay relevant. But sometimes, in our eagerness to speak, we forget to truly listen. So the next time her daughter called, Margaret paused. She listened without interrupting. She asked open-ended questions like, what's been on your mind lately? And when her daughter shared, Margaret didn't jump in, she allowed the silence. The space, the depth. That one call was different. It lasted longer. It felt warmer. And Margaret realized that giving someone room to speak was one of the most powerful ways to love them. Have you ever realized you were doing most of the talking or felt like no one was really hearing you? Share your experience below. Number 7, refusing help and pushing people away. Margaret had always seen herself as the strong one. Throughout her life, she had been the caregiver, the one who showed up, rolled up her sleeves, and made things happen. She raised her children on her own, kept a spotless home, and was the neighbor others called when something needed fixing. Independence wasn't just a value, it was part of her identity. But now in her late 70s, things had changed. Tasks that once felt simple now left her winded. One warm afternoon, she returned from the market and found herself struggling to lift a bag of groceries from her car. A young man passing by paused and offered, "Can I help you with that?" "Ma'am," Margaret, with her usual polite smile, replied quickly, "No, thank you. I've got it." But she didn't. By the time she dragged the bag inside, her shoulders were sore, and so was her spirit. As she sat in her kitchen rubbing her back, a quiet realization crept in. She hadn't just refused help with groceries. She had pushed away a chance for connection, a small moment of kindness that might have lightened more than just the weight in her arms. That night, she asked herself something she hadn't in a long time. Why is it so hard to let others care for me? Margaret began to see that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was an invitation. An invitation for someone to feel useful, to bond, to share a moment of human kindness. And when we refuse those invitations again and again, people eventually stop knocking. The next weekend, she spotted the same young man again. This time, she smiled and said, "Actually, I'd really appreciate a hand." His face brightened. And in that simple moment, something shifted. She felt seen, supported, less alone. Have you ever pushed someone away when you really needed help or felt honored to lend a hand to someone else? Share your experience in the comments. Number 8, being too frugal to enjoy life. Margaret had always been careful with money. She knew how to stretch a dollar, always shop sales, skipped luxury, and thought twice before spending on anything non-essential. Even after retiring with enough savings to live comfortably, she still asked herself, what if I need this later? So when her longtime friend Nancy invited her on a countryside getaway, Margaret hesitated. "Come on," Nancy said. "Just a few days of fresh air, good food, and laughter. You deserve it." But old habits whispered, "Better save that money, just in case." That evening, Margaret sat quietly with a cup of tea and thought, how long has it been since I did something just for fun? She had saved for years, always for someday. But what if someday never came? Here's the truth. Being responsible with money is wise. But life isn't only about saving, it's about living. Experiences bring deeper joy than things. A shared meal, a new place, A simple adventure, these create lasting memories. You worked hard for this stage of life. It's okay to enjoy the rewards. To change this habit, start by giving yourself permission to say yes to a new outfit, a concert ticket, or that weekend trip. Set aside a small joy fund just for things that make you smile. Ask yourself honestly, if not now, when Margaret eventually said yes, she laughed more in that weekend than she had in months. Watching the sunset beside her friend, she realized this is exactly what she had been saving for. Have you ever put off something joyful just because it felt like a waste of money? Let us know in the comments below. Number 9, talking down to younger generations. Margaret cherished every visit from her grandson, Daniel. She would light up the moment he walked through the door, but lately, their time together felt shorter, quieter, and somehow different. Daniel used to eagerly share stories about school, music, or the latest app he was exploring, but during a recent visit, Margaret noticed he barely spoke. When Daniel mentioned a game he loved playing with his friends, Margaret chuckled and replied, "In my day, we didn't need all those screens. We played outside and used our imagination." Daniel smiled faintly, but soon checked his phone and said, "I should probably head home." As the door clicked shut, Margaret sat in silence, feeling an unexpected pang of sadness. She hadn't meant to criticize. She only wanted to share how different life used to be. But slowly, it dawned on her, had she made Daniel feel small? Like his world didn't matter. That moment became a quiet wake-up call. It's easy, especially with age, to believe our way was the better way. But saying things like kids these days, or back in my time, can come off as dismissive. It builds walls instead of bridges. Younger generations grow up in a different world. With new tools and pressures, they don't need comparison, they need curiosity, encouragement, and understanding to reconnect, shift from judgment to genuine interest. Instead of shutting down a topic, ask, "What do you enjoy about that?" or "Show me how that works." By being open, you create a space where they want to stay longer, not leave early. The next time Daniel came over, Margaret smiled and asked, "So what do you like most about that game?" His face lit up as he explained it to her. They talked longer than they had in months. Real connection doesn't mean changing someone, it means understanding them. Have you ever felt disconnected from the younger generation or accidentally pushed someone away with your words? Let's reflect on that together. Number 10, holding on to grudges and regrets. Margaret sat quietly by the window, watching the golden leaves drift to the ground. Another holiday season was near, but instead of joy, she felt a weight she couldn't quite shake. Her mind kept circling back on the friend who had once betrayed her trust, the harsh words exchanged with her sister years ago, and all the moments she wished she could go back and do differently. It felt like an old film playing on repeat, always there, always heavy. One day, her neighbor Linda noticed the faraway look in her eyes and gently asked, "Is something bothering you?" Margaret sighed and said, "I just keep going over things I can't change." Linda nodded and said softly, "Holding on to the past is like dragging a suitcase filled with bricks. What if you just let it down?" When we carry old wounds and regrets, we rob ourselves of today's peace. The past can become a shadow that dims the brightness of the present. It creates emotional distance from those we care about. And over time, the stress can even affect our bodies, raising blood pressure, disrupting sleep, or weakening our immune system. Letting go doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means choosing to stop giving the past control over your life. Instead of asking, "Why did that happen?" try asking, "What can I learn from it?" Forgiveness is not for others, it's for your own healing. And if you're unsure where to start, write it all down. Then, tear it up or burn it. Let it be a symbol of release. That evening, Margaret wrote down her heaviest memories. As the paper turned to ash, She felt something shift inside, something softer, freer. Have you ever released a burden from your past? What helped you move forward? Share with us in the comments. Number 11. Ignoring health problems. Margaret had always taken pride in being strong and self-reliant. So when she began feeling dizzy while bending down or noticed her vision blurring more often, she simply brushed it off. This must be what aging feels like, she told herself with a sigh. But one morning, while reaching for a mug in the kitchen, a wave of dizziness hit her harder than ever. She lost her footing before she could steady herself, crashing onto the floor with sharp pain radiating through her hip. Hours later, in the hospital, a doctor gently said, "Margaret, if we had caught this earlier, we could have prevented the fall." Many older adults ignore symptoms, thinking they're just signs of aging. But small signs like dizziness could point to dehydration, low blood pressure, or early signs of stroke. Fatigue may hint at heart issues, and blurry vision could mean more than needing new glasses. Delaying care turns simple issues into emergencies. But the good news, prevention is far easier than recovery. So how can you stay ahead? Start by listening to your body. Even minor symptoms deserve attention. Don't wait for them to worsen. Keep up with regular checkups. Even if you feel fine, some of the most dangerous conditions are silent. Take sudden changes seriously. Shortness of breath, chest pain, confusion, or unexpected weight loss should never be ignored. Margaret made a promise to herself after that fall. She started drinking more water, joined a balance class at her community center, and kept every doctor's appointment. For her, independence no longer meant pushing through pain. It meant being proactive, protecting herself before things spiraled out of control. Have you ever ignored a health issue, only to regret it later? What made you finally take action? Let's start that conversation in the comments. Number 12. Forgetting to have fun and laugh. Margaret sat alone in her living room, flipping through old photo albums. Page after page showed a different version of herself, smiling, dancing, laughing with her grandchildren, surrounded by friends. But somewhere along the way, the laughter had faded. Her days had become predictable. Wake up, do the chores, watch the news, go to bed. She couldn't even remember the last time she truly laughed. One evening, her neighbor Linda knocked on the door. "Come over for a movie night," she said warmly. Margaret hesitated, but eventually said yes. They picked an old comedy she hadn't seen in decades. And before she knew it, she was laughing out loud, the kind of deep, hearty laugh that made her eyes water and her belly ache. For the first time in months, she felt something lift from her chest. Laughter, especially as we age, isn't just entertainment, it's healing. It lowers stress hormones like cortisol and boosts immunity. It improves circulation, strengthens the heart, and sharpens the mind. But more than that, it connects us. People are drawn to those who smile and share joy. Fin criat bon deepens relationships and gives us something to look forward to. So how can you bring more laughter back into your life? Watch a comedy, play a silly game, try something new without worrying if you'll be good at it. Spend time with people who lift your spirits. Don't be afraid to be silly or lighthearted. And most importantly, reconnect with the parts of yourself that once laughed freely. The next morning, instead of turning on the news, Margaret played her favorite music and danced around her kitchen. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't planned, but it was real. And in that moment, she felt alive again. When was the last time you laughed like that? Let's share a little joy in the comments. Julie never expected that small shifts in her daily choices could lead to such profound changes. But once she started letting go of past burdens, saying yes to new experiences, and allowing joy back into her days, something began to shift. Her world slowly opened up. Her daughter reached out more often. Neighbors stopped to chat. Even casual encounters with strangers felt warmer. Most importantly, she began to feel a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in years. The regrets, the loneliness, and the old emotional baggage started to fade, replaced by laughter, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose. Julie realized that aging wasn't just about time passing, it was about how you chose to spend each moment. She stopped fearing change and began embracing what life still had to offer. She couldn't rewrite the past, but she could choose what to do with today. Now it's your turn. Do any of these patterns sound familiar to you or someone you care about? What is one gentle step you can take toward a more joyful, connected life? Growing older is not something we can avoid, but how we live as we age, that's something we can shape.